If you think watching the returns roll in next Tuesday is going to be stressful, imagine being a news organization trying to cover the proceedings responsibly. There's an unprecedented array of challenges for the media to consider, and it's anyone's guess if they're up to the task. Adam has more.
Picture this. Donald Trump goes live Tuesday as the votes are still being counted and announces that he is the winner. There's an obvious argument for carrying the speech. After all, he is the president. But there are also arguments against, including the fact that this year we might not know the winner on Election Day at all.
We cannot stress enough the importance of patience, the possibilities that this could take a very long time.
But old bad habits are hard to kick.
A big call to make. CNN announces that we call Florida in the Al Gore column.
In 2000, that hastiness set the stage for a shockingly chaotic aftermath, and there's no indication the media has grown more patient. Another variable, whether and how to cover allegations of ballot fraud.
This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen.
Since Trump has said he can't lose a fair election, he and his surrogates have every reason to flood the zone with claims of electoral malfeasance. If they do, will the media vet them or just relay them as they roll in? Another challenge, covering voter intimidation.
The Proud Boys and other extremist groups like Boogaloo have been seen at protests heavily armed. So will they bring their guns to your polling place to do more than watch you line up to vote?
But extremism expert J.J. McNabb argues speculative coverage like that is itself a form of voter intimidation. Add it all up, and there are plenty of ways to screw up what could be a long day, and then some.
So, Adam, you brought up a lot of troubling issues that could potentially happen on Tuesday night. We're going to mull them all over sort of in order. We're going to take some time on this segment tonight where we're talking about premature acceptance speeches, talking about voter fraud, talking about the role that social media could play in this in terms of like really going off the rails, and then something that could possibly lead to violence as well. So I want to just start with the dilemma that you raised about taking a premature acceptance speech, which is more likely to be Donald Trump than Joe Biden. But what would the networks do? It's, as you said, he's the president.
It's a huge question. I cannot imagine that if the president took the stage to deliver comments, that we wouldn't have everyone instantly deciding they were going to broadcast it. The question is, how would they do it? For the TV networks, for example, do you do a split screen with the president in one side and then another panel with people able to respond in real time to the claims that he's making? Because given the president's track record, there are good chances he's going to be saying things that are not true. Do you let him go for a little bit and then maybe cut him off so that you can analyze what he said? It would be so hard to be the network that cut away from the president's remarks. And yet, again, there's going to be so much to unpack if that scenario plays out. I do think we all tend to be instinctually deferential to the office of the president. I think that's changed a little bit given this president's unique communication style, but it's really going to be put to the test if this happens on Tuesday or anytime thereafter without the result actually being a done deal.
Yeah, it's a big problem. If this is close, then it's virtually certain that President Trump will jump out to an early lead because of the in-person voting. And he's going to be very tempted to claim victory. And what we're going to see is the same 60-40 split that we've seen for the last 4 years. We're probably going to see Fox News taking it at face value, and everybody else is going to be trying to put it in some sort of context and saying that we don't really know who the winner is yet. And you end up with the same mess that we always have.
Well, I think that what the correct thing to do would be to take the speech, to begin to take the speech, cut away, but while he's speaking, say, we have no evidence that this is correct, that he has prematurely decided to give this speech. Then I would also announce, because all the networks have a cable arm, you can see the whole speech, if you wish, on the cable arm. But we're cutting away because it is not clear by our data that he has, in fact, won. That's what I would do if I were making a call.
Totally agree. I think that you have to take the speech, and maybe you take the whole speech. How you orchestrate this in terms of a banner or whatever you're reporting, even if you bring down his audio and you bring up your anchors saying, we do not have the evidence yet that this race is, decided, and you report that. I'd be very interested to see even Donald Trump go out without solid or at least some evidence that he has won and claim a victory prematurely. The other thing that I think may come up is on the local level, and I know we're going to touch on this a little bit, but if things like this happen, premature victory speech, local media, I think, is watching this in a very difficult position, particularly in the Boston area. There's a lot of concern that there's going to be social unrest and backlash, particularly against the media, not only locally, but nationally, if this thing goes a certain way. Well, and there is so much preparation going on right now behind the scenes. I've been talking to former colleagues who are getting ready for the possibility of social unrest. That includes new kinds of security training and security personnel with them on election night and beyond, something we've never seen before.
Mike, that is an excellent transition into the next segment I was going to bring up, which is the role that social media is going to play. I mean, I was talking to Daniel Kreis from the University of North Carolina about that a few weeks ago. He was saying, you know, it's tempting for us to fill the void with stuff that's coming over the transom from various social media sites, but some of it may be legitimate, some of it may not, some of it may be claims of voter fraud, some of it may be instigating, some of it may be a warning that something, that looting or rioting is about to take place. So what do you do? What's the responsible thing to do?
Well, the responsible thing to do is to only go with official sources, have reporters on the ground, make sure of what you're reporting about, report it with the right tone, but you have to report it. And I think that you don't ever report things off of social media directly unless they're official sources and only under certain circumstances. We have to be responsible. We have to be, as we said earlier, nobody remembers who was first. Everybody remembers who was right. And I think also it goes to tone. You played that report, Adam's report earlier, that one reporter. I thought her tone and her choice of somewhat inflammatory language was not helpful.
Well, I also would think that you have to, I mean, first of all, there's other news to report that night. People forget. I know it's the presidential election, but there are so many down ballot races. So it's not a question of you don't have anything to say if you don't know who won the presidential election. Actually, there's a lot to say about the down ballot election. So let's do that because it's likely we'll have information closer to some definitiveness around those races. And then let everybody know along the lines at night, we are not going to come to you with information we cannot confirm. And that includes if we possibly hear that something untoward is happening outside. We're just not going to let you know until we know it's happening for sure.
What about cut into that kind of stuff?
I do not do that. Do not do that. Do not do that. I think that is really irresponsible.
I don't know. If looting started happening on Newbury Street, Adam,
I don't think you cut to it.
No?
No. You find out what's going on. You know?
I think it's a really tough call, and there's so many different gradations to consider here. When we're talking about social media and whether people might put reports out there in an unfiltered way or lean on them to fill open time, especially as the hours stretch into days. There was a video that was making the rounds on social media. I think it originated on TikTok. I'm not young and hip enough to be on TikTok, but I saw it on Twitter. And it was a polling site in Beverly Hills where, according to the video, the woman who shot it was being subjected to some really troubling harassment as she drove in to vote. So on the one hand, just to think out loud about this particular piece of evidence for a while, I have not independently confirmed its authenticity. I should note that right at the outset. But then when you think about it, if the video is true, it shows very troubling behavior on the part of Trump supporters. But by disseminating a video like that on Election Day, for example, the media is both reporting something newsworthy and maybe making it more likely that people who might want to go to the polls are going to decide to stay home because they don't want to have to deal with something like that. So there's one good being served, but then there's also a negative effect being created. And my hunch is that in newsrooms where people are going live from the start of the day on until whenever, there are going to be so many incredibly intense real-time conversations about does the balance does the balance of good here outweigh the balance of potential harm? And in some cases we won't know the answer and people just have to make a decision based on their gut.
Well, I think there's a couple of different things that we're talking about that we need to separate here. First of all, if there is election-related violence, it has to be reported. You can't not report it simply because it might scare people into not showing up at the polls. And so when you talk about what if there's looting on
Excuse me, Dana, it's more likely to happen after the polls are closed.
It's more likely to happen after the polls are closed, but there's a possibility of this happening while the polls are open too, voter intimidation and things like that. So that's one issue. But the other issue is we've all seen some of these social media reports from extremely low quality news sites reporting, ballots found in the river, ballots that have been discarded and all of that. We shouldn't touch that unless it's been vetted and verified. And I hope that most of the media are going to be good enough to not go down that road.
Callie, what if it's somebody like the president or one of the president's surrogates claiming that there was that kind of voter fraud?
Again, I think you do what we just did with the speech. You say, this is, whoever it is. We have not verified this. Do not give them, 10 minutes to rail on about it. Stop it. Say, we're going to go verify this or, and that's it. I just don't think you do it unless you know. I mean,
there's also, sorry, Callie, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say, there are the cable outlets so that you can say, we're going to run the whole thing. If you want to see that, we are not running it on this broadcast network. I think that's an option.
And context will be absolutely crucial as allegations of voter fraud are floated, as I have no doubt they will be. I think every news organization talking about this stuff needs to be reminding people the point that we made in the package that people just saw, which is that the president has said he cannot lose a fair election, that the only way he can possibly lose is if there is fraud. And he has said there will be fraud. So he has an incentive to make every possible imaginable claim of fraud. His surrogates have that same incentive. And that's context that people need to be reminded of, not just once an hour, but again and again and again if claims like this are being made.
Yep.